If I tell you right now that reading is good, as you probably have heard from years growing up, from your parents or if your teachers, would you agree with me? Most likely, right? Most of us know that reading is good for us. Why is it that we aren't always carrying around a book with us like we would to something that's supposed to be good for us? I'm not really here to criticize you, but I myself think that not everybody has to do that to prove your love of reading. Let me tell you about my experience with reading. Growing up, I've always loved it. I used to read magazines, fairy tales, comic books back when I was a kid. Back in the secondary school, I would read novels and science books, and then I came to pick up my so-called reading career in grade 7, where I was doubling up the quantity of books I was reading, and at the same time, I became extremely selective with what I read. Because actually, to tell you the truth is, being selective with everything is just fancy way to cover up the real thing that happened back then. Which is me wasting a lot of time questioning whether or not I should pick up a book. Let me just describe to you what exactly was happening back then. I stood in front of a stack of books like this, and I would think, if I read this book, is that gonna help me solve my homework? No, I'm not gonna read it. And I call that being selective because I thought that was good. But eventually, I realized that I was not being productive at all, and I started asking myself why. Because I was doing something that was supposed to be good, which was being selective, but then I ended up wasting time instead of really getting any reading done. After years of observing and reflecting on what I did back then, I have come to notice something in teenagers that I would like to call the skepticism in the power of reading. What's skepticism in the power of reading to me? I would like to define my definition of skepticism in reading as having doubts in the process of reading, or thinking of reading as a means to solve an immediate problem. For this time skepticism of reading or over-practical approach to reading, I classify these people into two types. The first type are the people who never really give reading a chance because they cannot possibly think how reading can help them in any way. The second type of people are those who have actually had fierce beliefs in power of books, but after not seeing themselves getting instant results, they give up, and their beliefs shattered into strong disbelief. But for both these types, there are some mindset shifts that you're going to have to make in order to break free from these limiting beliefs about books. Now let's get started with the first type of the over-practical. These are people or those who spend time sitting to convince themselves that reading cannot possibly get better in any way. They cannot see how reading this book is going to make their lives immediately better. For example, if I'm having this really difficult math homework and reading this book is not gonna help and not gonna do it, that is the mindset of people in type 1. If you ask these people if they think reading is good, they really like to say yes. They do think that reading is good, but easier said than done. They only look at the short-term benefits of reading, which is how it's going to benefit them today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, to which they not to see any possibility that they read changing anything. Don't get me wrong though, these people are not lazy. In fact, on the bright side, they may be someone who is extremely result oriented and particular with what they spend time on. However, as they think of reading is as a means to solve immediate problem or simply consider it as temporary motivation, they start questioning the process of reading if is it actually help them. For example, to solve their problem. I've been in this position, to be honest with you, and why you may think that why is it so hard to convince these people to maybe just giving reading a chance? It's not really that easy. Let me just play it out. How a conversation with this type of person could go. You would tell them, why is it so hard just to try reading and see if it works and acceptable logic would say, would reading literature get better at math? Obviously, you're not gonna study literature to get better at math, right? That's their logic. If it doesn't help them solve my homework, if it doesn't help me get better at school immediately, why should I waste hours on it? Now we're moving on to the next type, which is disbelievers. These people are very interesting as they used to have strong beliefs in books. They used to be the ones like me standing here right now telling you that reading is good. But the thing is, after reading several times, not seeing themselves turn into geniuses overnight, they give up. They lose motivation. For this type of people, the problem really isn't with their expectations for results because as leaders, we should always respect an outcome to come out of everything that we do. The problem is with the degree of expectations as they set up to their results. When you read something, you expect the result and reality doesn't, can be extremely discouraging and even frustrating. Therefore, no matter how strong your initial belief in books were, you eventually just stop believing in them and then you refuse to buy what you consider a package of waste of time and energy along with complimentary gift or disappointment ever again. And that's how we arrive at the second type of people. For both types, there is some realization that they're going to have to make in order to break themselves free from these limiting beliefs. The problem with type 1 is that they limit themselves to only what they think. For example, if I'm reading this book, I need to know exactly how it's going to be benefit me and I need to see that scenario. But the many things that we can't predict what happens to us, failures and especially opportunities is not one of them. We should not be overly worried about what you would read today will benefit you tomorrow or overly attached to how exactly what will play out because we don't know. I know that right now you can have the energy for time, curiosity to learn. I don't know if that also holds true for the future. Back when I was having these problems as well, there was this story that really inspired me to maybe step out of my comfort zone to test this theory out. It's a story about Steve Jobs I came across. We know who Steve Jobs is, right? Highly iPhone users, he's the CEO and founder of Apple. He's one of the geniuses that we know. We know that he runs Apple, so basically he does what has to do with information technology and business. We would expect a person like this to be stuffed with knowledge from business books and books on IT. But back in university, I took a calligraphy class just for fun. Calligraphy is basically, to put it simply, the art of writing fancy letters that you can see in cards and birthday cards. You know what I'm talking about, right? He took it just for fun, and personally for me, I would never imagine a way calligraphy would have someone who is doing business in information and technology. And maybe he didn't know how that would help either, but eventually his knowledge on calligraphy, the knowledge that he took from the calligraphy class came into use when he was designing the interface for the MacBook. The story really inspired me to maybe try out and stop doubting too much on whether or not what I'm learning right now will come into use in the future. And now I've come to learn that every single piece of knowledge that you're taking in will come back to help you at one point in your life, especially when you least expect it. That is why you should stop doubting too much about whether or not you should learn something. Oh, alright.